What if I told you that a group of pensioners with a combined age of over 400 years pulled off the biggest burglary in British legal history? No, this isn't a Guy Ritchie movie. This actually happened. Over the Easter weekend of 2015, a gang of elderly thieves broke into the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Company in London's Diamond District and made off with an estimated £14 million in cash, jewelry, and precious metals. They disabled alarms, drilled through concrete walls, and ransacked 73 safety deposit boxes. And they almost got away with it. This is the story of the Hatton Garden Heist, where Ocean's 11 meets grumpy old men. To understand this heist, you need to know about Hatton Garden. Located in the heart of London, Hatton Garden has been the center of Britain's diamond trade for over a century. The streets are lined with jewelry shops, diamond dealers, and gem merchants. It's where royalty, celebrities, and the wealthy go to buy their bling. But beneath this glittering surface lies something even more valuable. Dozens of safe deposit facilities where people store their most precious possessions. Cash, jewelry, gold, important documents, all locked away in supposedly impenetrable vaults beneath the streets of London. The Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Company was one of these facilities. It occupied a nondescript building at 8890 Hatton Garden, and its vault was located in the basement, accessed through a heavy steel door and protected by a sophisticated alarm system. Or so everyone thought. Now, let's meet our unlikely criminals. This wasn't a gang of young, tech-savvy thieves. These were career criminals in their 60s and 70s, men who had spent decades in and out of prison and who decided to pull off one last big job. The ringleader was Brian Reeder, age 76 at the time of the heist. Reeder was a career burglar who had been involved in the infamous Brinks Mat robbery back in 1983, where £26 million in gold bullion was stolen. He was a legend in the underworld. Then there was John Kenny Collins, 75, the group's lookout and wheeler-dealer. Terry Perkins, 67, was an experienced thief who had previously escaped from prison. Danny Jones, the youngest, at 60, was the muscle and the one who operated the heavy drilling equipment. Carl Wood, 58, was brought in for his expertise, and William Lincoln, 60, acted as a driver and logistics man. Finally, there was Hugh Doyle, 48, the relative youngster who helped dispose of the stolen goods. These weren't tech geniuses or parkour experts. These were grandfathers with bad knees and heart conditions. But what they lacked in youth, they made up for in experience, cunning, and sheer audacity. The gang spent months planning the heist. They studied the building, the alarm systems, the police patrol patterns, and the security cameras. They knew that the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Company would be closed over the long Easter weekend, giving them 3 full days to work undisturbed. Their plan was audacious. They would break into an adjacent building, use the communal lift shaft to access the basement of the Safe Deposit Company, and then drill through the thick concrete vault wall. Once inside, they'd ransack the safety deposit boxes and escape before anyone noticed. They chose the Easter weekend specifically because it was one of the few times in the year when the building would be completely empty for multiple days. They also knew that police response times would be slower over the holiday weekend. The gang acquired a Hilti DD350 industrial drill, a massive piece of equipment weighing over 50 kilograms and capable of drilling through reinforced concrete. They also brought along hydraulic rams, crowbars, and bags to carry the loot. On Thursday, April 2nd, 2015, the gang put their plan into action. At around 9 p.m., Brian Reeder, Danny Jones, Terry Perkins, and Carl Wood arrived at Hatton Garden in a white van. They were dressed casually, just four old men out for the evening. They entered an adjacent building and made their way to the basement. Using the communal lift shaft, they gained access to the basement of the safe deposit company. So far, so good. Then came the hard part. The vault wall was 50 centimeters thick, reinforced concrete that would take hours to drill through. Danny Jones, being the most physically capable, took the lead on the drilling. The noise was deafening, but they were banking on the fact that the building was empty and that the thick walls would muffle the sound. They drilled for hours. The dust was thick, the work was exhausting, and these were men in their 60s and 70s doing manual labor that would challenge someone half their age. Eventually, they managed to drill a hole large enough to squeeze through. But here's where things went wrong the first night. Brian Reeder, the ringleader and mastermind, was 76 years old and suffering from various health issues. The physical strain, the dust, and the stress became too much. He essentially had a panic attack and told the others he couldn't continue. He left, and the remaining gang members decided to call it a night. They would have to come back. On the second night, Friday, April 3rd, the gang returned, minus Brian Reeder, who was too unwell to participate. Basil, a mysterious figure who was never identified at the time, took his place. This time, they successfully squeezed through the hole in the vault wall. Inside, they found rows and rows of safety deposit boxes, 73 of them to be exact. Using hydraulic rams and crowbars, they forced open box after box, emptying the contents into bags and wheelie bins they had brought with them. The haul was extraordinary. Cash, jewelry, gold, diamonds, watches, and precious metals. One box alone contained 1 million pounds in cash. Another held antique jewelry worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. They worked through the night, ransacking the vault like kids in a candy store. What they didn't fully appreciate was that the building's alarm had been triggered. The alarm system had detected the intrusion and sent an alert to the monitoring company. A security guard was even dispatched to check the building. He looked around, saw nothing suspicious from the outside, and left. The police were notified but didn't respond, a decision that would later cause a massive scandal. The gang worked undisturbed through the night, loading their loot into bags and bins. By Saturday morning, they had stolen an estimated 14 million pounds worth of valuables. They cleaned up as best they could, squeezed back through the hole, and left the building.
The gang initially got away clean. The heist wasn't discovered until Tuesday morning when staff returned after the Easter weekend. By then, the criminals had had days to disappear. But here's where their age and experience became a liability rather than an asset. These were old-school criminals who didn't understand modern surveillance technology. They thought they had been careful, but London is one of the most surveilled cities in the world. Scotland Yard's flying squad, the elite robbery unit, was assigned to the case. They began reviewing CCTV footage from around Hatton Garden and quickly identified the white van used by the gang. From there, they tracked the vehicle's movements and identified the suspects. But the gang's biggest mistake was greed and ego. Instead of lying low, they met up repeatedly to divide the loot and celebrate their success. They went to pubs, made phone calls, and talked openly about the heist. These conversations were captured on police surveillance. One particularly damning conversation had the gang members laughing about the heist, mocking the police, and boasting about how they'd gotten away with it. They talked about melting down gold, selling jewelry, and where to hide the cash. They had no idea they were being watched and recorded. Within weeks, the flying squad had identified all the main suspects. On May 19, 2015, just over 6 weeks after the heist, police raided multiple addresses simultaneously and arrested 7 men. At Terry Perkins' home, officers found a reader for testing the purity of gold. At Carl Wood's address, they discovered a bag containing 60,000 pounds in cash and jewelry from the heist. At Danny Jones' home, they found a book on diamond valuation. The evidence was overwhelming. CCTV footage showed the suspects entering and leaving the area. Phone records placed them near Hatton Garden during the heist. Forensic evidence linked them to the crime scene. and their own conversations captured on surveillance were essentially confessions. But here's the twist. A significant portion of the loot was never recovered. Of the estimated 14 million pounds stolen, only about 4 million pounds worth was ever found. The rest have been hidden, sold, or disposed of. And to this day, nobody knows exactly what happened to it. The gang members were tried and convicted in 2016. Brian Reeder, Terry Perkins, John Collins, and Danny Jones all pleaded guilty. They received sentences ranging from 6 to 7 years in prison. The sentencing judge noted the sophisticated planning, but also criticized their old-fashioned methods and their arrogance. These were career criminals who thought they could pull off one last job, but they were undone by modern technology and their own egos. Terry Perkins died in prison in 2018, taking his secrets about the missing loot to the grave. The mysterious Basil, the inside man who helped on the second night, remained unidentified for years, becoming a legend in criminal circles. He was eventually identified as Michael Seed and arrested in 2018. The Hatton Garden heist captured the British public's imagination. It had everything: elderly criminals, a daring robbery, bumbling security, and missing millions. It's been the subject of multiple films, documentaries, and books. But perhaps the most lasting legacy is the question that remains unanswered. Where's the rest of the loot? Somewhere out there, hidden in a storage unit, buried in a garden, or locked away in a safe, is millions of pounds worth of jewelry and cash. And the only people who know where it is aren't talking. So that's the story of the Hatton Garden heist, Britain's biggest burglary pulled off by a gang of pensioners who proved that age is just a number when it comes to crime. Do you think the rest of the loot will ever be found? Until next time, stay curious.